Well, look, the other big story from the States, at least, is the shutting down of US aid. Now, in a minute, we're going to look at the implications for quite a number of squealing British NGOs and charities and so on. But what have you got on this?
This is a seismic tremor that's happened here for whatever reason, and it could be for political reasons. USAID, we'll bring this up on screen. This is the U.S. International Agency for Aid and Development. They claimed to do, food aid and things like that, and certainly they do a bit of that, founded by John F. Kennedy in 1961. And really it was an influence during the Cold War era, influence operations run by USAID here. It's over for now, and this is what we'll try to explain to you. So it's not fully gone, but all the kind of crazy DEI, woke, international LGBT theatrical performances, all of that nested under a $40 billion per year budget at USAID. And that money gets spread around to a lot of places. The biggest recipient is actually under the banner of governance, the most amount of funding. Then you have pro-democracy activities under the civil society banner, and then also paying for and subsidizing foreign media, Mike. This is a big part of it. So if you look at places like Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, all of these places on the cusp either of NATO membership or Western versus Russian influence, they'll spend a lot more money there, plus anything in China's external orbit across the Middle East. You name it, they're there. South America, they're all over the world. So Romania, a lot of media activity there to make it pro-NATO. Same with Bulgaria, Ukraine, and so forth. They'll run defamation operations against Western journalists using Ukrainian cutouts funded by USAID. I was in one of those USAID funded hit lists of journalists. And so it's a good way to find out who's doing good independent media work.
Right.
You just go look at those hit lists. So that's what they've been doing. So they've taken a wrecking ball to this. And I think the initial impetus was Samantha Power was the head of USAID. We'll show her in a minute, but she was one of the progenitors of Russiagate. And a lot of the Russiagate stuff was laundered through USAID funded cutout operations, NGOs, media, plus the southern border issue was definitely tied into USAID. So those were the initial targets. But what they found was a lot more once they lifted up the hood and saw what was underneath this dirty engine of U.S. Power and influence. So here's Samantha Power here. I mean, she's the head of it. Here she's running for notice the Atlantic Council is, another one of these NGOs. They're hosting a forum here. This is Gay Pride Month, I guess. So it's what USAID is doing for Pride around the world. So they're really into funding all of these sort of progressive identity politics, trans, LGBT, and so forth, feminist stuff, and basically everything that the incoming Trump administration and J.D. Vance and everybody, Elon Musk wants to basically take a wrecking ball to. So that's Mrs. Cass Sunstein there. And we'll go on here. So Marco Rubio is now the appointed USAID acting administrator. So he's basically taken over. This is the Secretary of State. So what they've done here is interesting. They pulled USAID under the State Department for tighter management. They'll do culling. They'll keep the things they want. They'll get rid of the things they don't like. And they'll probably add new things. And some of this is also going to get farmed into the new CIA, the new Central Intelligence Agency. So, and that's where it was before Kennedy created USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy. All of this regime change, democracy promotion was done through, and influence in media was done through directly under the CIA's umbrella. Trump will also take under the executive branch direct control and management of some of these deep state, clandestine, or whatever you want to call them, influence operations. So that's just a little bit of it. There's probably a lot. It's much more complex than that. But what's interesting about Marco Rubio, who is now railing against USAID, he's also on the board of the International Republican Institute, which is funded by USAID to the tune of, some people are reporting, as much as 130 million in total. I'm not sure if that's annual funding. I think that's just aggregate. But Rubio, I don't know. I haven't checked the financials close enough to know if he is taking a second salary from the International Republican Institute, which is the right-wing version of the National Endowment for Democracy, which the Democrats tend to work through the NED to do their influence ops internationally. And the International Republican Institute, which was run mainly by John McCain while he was alive, they ran Saakashvili from Georgia through here. They've ran Salumi, the French president of Georgia recently. She's part of this organization as well. Rubio's on the board, as is Lindsey Graham and others. So, I mean, they're kind of involved in this as well, even though they're pretending to be attacking it, which I find very interesting.
So what about Chris Murphy?
Well, Chris Murphy, there's an interesting character. So he is railing against, he's a senator from Connecticut. He was on stage with John McCain before the Maidan, whipping up the neo-Nazi crowds in December in Kiev in 2014. That's Chris Murphy. So he's really upset about this. Now the Democrats are really pushing back. So he got very angry and got a crowd together in front of Capitol Hill. And here's what he said.
So, Elon Musk has been floating all sorts of awful, terrible conspiracy theories about what happens at USAID. Let's make it very clear that every single day, America is safer because of what happens at USAID. USAID fights terrorist groups all across this world, making sure that we address the underlying causes for a retreat to terrorism. USAID chases China all around the world, making sure that China doesn't monopolize contracts for critical minerals and port infrastructure all around the world. It supports freedom fighters everywhere in this world. Up until yesterday, delivering firewood, for instance, to the brave Ukrainian defenders on the Eastern Front.
So it funds freedom fighters all around the world. He's talking about the white helmets. He's talking about ISIS. He's talking about Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda, the Tigrays in Ethiopia. I mean, wherever you find terrorists, you will find USAID. What Chris Murphy is talking about. The funny one was firewood for the Ukrainians on the front line, who are basically getting massacred in one of the worst war of attritions ever. And they're cheering like this is some great achievement. So, so firewood here for Zelensky. He's saying thank you very much to USAID and Donald Trump for the firewood, and it's going to be a warm winter in Ukraine. So this is kind of what they get up to. I find it to be comical, to say the least. But what you were talking about before, let's just understand what we're dealing with here, and this is where it gets interesting. This organization is an instrument of smart power. Like soft power is media influence internationally, smart power is NGO influence. And so this is a really important part of the U.S. empire. So while they have to be careful if they want to keep their empire, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, I'm happy to see USAID being dismantled. I've been exposing it for over a decade through my work on interviews, podcasts, and so forth. I've even written a paper and done academic papers on it as well. So it's like, I'm happy to see this, but I don't think the Trump administration, these people realize the depth of how far the influence spreads. I mean, this is a funded network whose tentacles reach into every single country around the world. I saw this firsthand in the Middle East, where they would use USAID to divide and rule. So they'll fund the Christians in Lebanon, but not the Shiites, to create animosity between sectarian division in Lebanon. So they'll do English language courses in wealthy Christian areas, but they won't fund anything in some of the Muslim areas.
Right.
So those Christians will be more pro-U.S. They'll be much more on board with whatever the U.S. embassy is saying regarding Syria and Lebanon and so forth. So this is how it works in Afghanistan, in Africa, and they can switch it on and off depending on who's in power. There's a fifth column that USAID has funded in every country, and all they have to do is flick the switch depending on who comes into power. If it's a populist they don't like, flick the switch. You can get people on the street against Vučić, marching in Serbia, as you can see, or start whispering campaigns like Vučić is selling out Serbia to NATO or something like that. And these people are all on the payroll, basically, of USAID. So they don't realize, a lot of people in the Trump administration, Rubio knows how what a valuable tool it is here. But let's just take a look. So 10 years ago, roughly, or 2016, Smart Power, this is an article that we published. I think you did a previous version of this up at UK Column. And here is where we expose the white helmets. So among all these different, you've got the National Democratic Institute, you've got the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor. That's international. The Middle East Partnership Initiative, the Millennium Challenge Corporation. You've seen that in the UK as well, and across Europe. And these things are tied into, the WEF and Soros Open Society. But USAID is the Swiss Army knife of NGOs. And the latter's reputation here as a facade for U.S. covert operations is well documented by now and is currently, it's the U.S.'s #1 funding vehicle for the controversial white helmets in Syria. Tens of millions of dollars were funneled to the white helmets through USAID. And right now, with all the exposures Elon Musk is talking about, Marco Rubio, Trump, nobody is mentioning how much money the white helmets received from the United States government via USAID, because both parties do not want to own that. So they're being very selective. They're talking about DEI, trans theater productions in Ireland. All of that stuff makes headlines of the kind of anti-woke stuff, but the really hardcore funding of terrorist organizations. The White Helmets, let's not kid ourselves, members of the White Helmets are proven to be also fighters with al-Nusra. There's photographic evidence. We published reams of it over the years. So effectively, they're subsidizing terrorism in Syria for years, the United States government. And so is there going to be any accountability for that? Is Elon Musk going to pull any of that up? Is he going to send his savants in to show us where the White Helmets money is going? And the contractors under USAID, like Chemonics in Washington, D.C., they're directly involved with all of these groups in Syria, all of them.
Yeah.
That's not going to get exposed. I haven't seen it exposed yet, so we'll do our best to expose it and put pressure on those people to maybe release some of that information, because I think it's highly